Hi, and welcome to You Have My Sword. I just got back from the Game Developers Conference in San Francisco, so my game brain is activated in a big way. So we're talking about Lord of the Rings games, for better and for worse. Let's talk about it. Before we get into the episode, let's answer a listener question. And D writes in, why did cutting off Sauron's finger defeat him? It didn't defeat him, not necessarily. This is a scene from the movies that was probably written with the intention of showing Isildur in a heroic light to kind of balance out his flawed character, maybe. There is no reason to imagine that the mere separation of Sauron from his ring would entail a physical defeat for the Dark Lord, right? He spent over 3,000 years rebuilding his power without the ring, and he was still tremendously powerful at the end of the Third Age. What happened was that Sauron himself wrestled with Gil-galad and Elendil, who are incredibly powerful, probably in a sort of challenge like Morgoth and Fingolfin, and ended up killing them both. But he was thrown down in the process. And all that to say that Isildur got a bit of a kill steal, you could say. He probably would be very annoying to play a first-person shooter with. So I hope that answers your question. He was not defeated by losing the finger that was connected to the ring. He just got the bricks beat off him by Gil-galad and Elendil, and then Isildur came in for the easy kill, if that makes sense. And he wasn't necessarily killed. We know that, right? But yeah, I hope that answers your question. Okay, so let's get into the episode. I am freshly back from the Game Developers Conference that takes place in San Francisco. And if you're unfamiliar, it is a place for game devs to go and network, present, give talks, go to various educational panels, basically all things game development. There is a booth aspect to it, like any other con. It's hyper niche, and it's probably my favorite event as it really hits my brain meat with creative serotonin and really makes me excited to work in the industry when it's extremely easy to feel jaded. It's not an easy industry to work in, but it's definitely a rewarding one, and it's what I've wanted to do since I was a kid. So in that regard, I feel insanely successful. Not many people get to do what they say they want to be when they grow up, right? When I was a kid, I was literally drawing my own Super Mario levels across construction paper, like 15 pieces of construction paper in like landscape mode, drawing my own levels. So yeah. It feels good to work in game development. It's what I've wanted to do since I was a kid. So I love this conference. Anyways, all that to say, I have video games and game development on the brain now more than ever, and wanted to talk about both my favorite and least favorite Lord of the Rings games. I hope you guys find this episode fun and irreverent, and please understand that game development is an insanely difficult process with so many moving parts. So when I review a game, and I use that term loosely, I am not discrediting the devs that worked on it. Bad decisions usually start from the top, and budgets can disappear at any time, as well as an industry favorite, crunch culture, forcing devs to meet impossible deadlines, often at the expense of the product. This is just meant to be a laugh and hopefully get you guys to try some of these games. So we're going to start off with my favorite game. So I'm going to do 3 games that I really love and 3 games that are a huge question mark to me. And we're going to start off with Middle-earth: Shadows of Mordor. So Monolith Studios' Lord of the Rings: Shadow of Mordor is arguably one of the dopest things to ever come from the Lord of the Rings mythos. In the game, you play a Gondorian ranger named Talion in the years leading up to the War of the Ring. As a ranger, you are assigned to the Black Gate with your family to keep an eye on the orcs in Mordor. What are they up to? Like, what do they do when they're not plundering or whatever? Just like kissing and carving their initials into trees. That's what I imagine orcs are doing. I feel like maybe they get a bit of a bad PR. But at the very start of the game, your entire family dies horribly, including you. But thanks to a dark wraith, you are spared from death and take revenge into your own hands on the Dark Lord's lieutenants, the Hammer, the Tower, and the Black Hand. So let's talk about the Nemesis system. This system was developed by Monolith specifically for the game. So it's kind of like where you go around Mordor, going apeshit and creating individual stories as you encounter orc captains, creating nemeses along the way. The gameplay is straightforward hack and slash and kick and punch, kind of like if Assassin's Creed took place in Middle-earth. You weave between packs of orcs, taking them apart with a myriad of weapons. You can also switch between Ranger and Wraith form as you like, which is a nice touch. I really think the Nemesis system really helped this game feel alive, and the enemies that you faced were constantly evolving and getting more and more challenging, which is the kind of scaling we like to see in a game and is just objectively good game design, right? Shadow of Mordor was not a game that many had spectacular expectations for. I think largely because the game scene had been thrush with very mediocre Lord of the Rings games over the last 10 or more years. But for what it accomplished, it was a gem. The combat was complex enough to be engaging and challenging, but not overly complicated. The world design was mostly in keeping with the world's style, and the story was well written, taking creative liberties with the property that made sense, but followed a lot of loved core themes. And it really leveraged the game's unique mechanics without them feeling like a crutch. Anyways, I love it. This is worth playing and has a very comfy quality to it. So if you're homesick, instead of throwing the trilogy on, maybe jump into this game and immerse yourself a little bit. Is that you? Come say hi, we're recording. There you are. All right, this is actually Behemoth's favorite game. This is Lord of the Rings Online. Behemoth loves this game. With a license as lucrative as Lord of the Rings, Turbine Entertainment could have simply created a World of Warcraft clone with Middle-earth nomenclature on it and called it a day. And the IP is often handled this way. Thankfully, what we got was far from that. We get a fresh, fun, and weirdly immersive experience that almost felt unexpected. The Lord of the Rings Online is such an accessible experience. Whether you're a fan of Lord of the Rings or not, or simply just like MMO-style games or a fantasy landscape, you can easily jump into this and fully get it. It's no doubt going to draw comparisons to the genre's larger titles, but Lord of the Rings Online managed to kind of carve out its own niche away from the World of Warcrafts of the world and cultivate its own awesome community. It's incredibly satisfying to play, and this game is truly a testament to its great design. Its inventive aspects are peripheral, but they are there, and combined with slick and engaging questing, the package makes for plenty of appealing exploration. The game is just so well-rounded. With narrative-focused MMOs like Dungeons & Dragons Online and Asheron's Call 2 under Turbine's belt, it should come as no surprise that a group of story quests thread together your adventures, which lends well to an IP that is adapted from, well, narrative, right? Completing each quest rewards you with a high quality cutscene, and it's in these moments that the license shines the most. These cutscenes are so sicko. They capture a feeling of Lord of the Rings that is hard to describe but easy to feel when you watch the scenes. I don't know how to explain it. It's just something like emotional and tangible. You just kind of have to see it and feel it for yourself. While the graphics are a bit dated now, Lord of the Rings is still up and running and absolutely worth checking out. I'd actually really love to stream this game. It's something I think about all the time in regards to what I can use or what I can do for content for streaming. And while I usually make chainmail on stream and don't stream games that often, this is a game that I would love to do on the regular. And I want to say that when I say the graphics are dated, it does not take away from the game at all. I don't think high quality and up-to-date graphics make a game good. Gameplay makes a game good. Narrative makes a game good. Music makes a game good. So when you jump in, you can tell it's an older game, but it only like lends to its charm, if that makes sense. I'm not a graphics snob. I play a lot of really minimalist style games on Steam. So definitely don't take that as a negative. Here's actually some fun information about the development of the game. Once upon a time, Sierra Online first announced the development of a licensed Middle-earth MMORPG in 1998. Some of you were not even born yet. Disgusting. This caused some excitement among fans who were awaiting the Lord of the Rings movies and was also slightly controversial for a few design decisions. The most debated design idea was the planned use of permadeath. When a player character would die in the game, the character would be permanently dead. Most MMORPGs resurrect a dead character with minor penalties. Sierra Online had financial troubles in 1999 and replaced the staff working on the game. A tale as old as time.
Says that workers in America must have the constitutional right to form a union. And right now it is so difficult.
And that pretty much sums it up for Lord of the Rings Online. So we are going to jump into Lego Lord of the Rings. Here's the thing. It's a Lego game. All Lego games beat ass. They could cut Frodo's head off and have the eagles fly the ring to Mordor, and it would be my favorite game in the world. Lots of people have called it Lego Skyrim, largely due to the expanse of the world being filled with so many nooks and secrets, valuable bricks hidden behind waterfalls and deep inside caves. The world is peppered with amusing minifigs waiting to send you off on fetch quests. The expanse that gives Lego Lord of the Rings a rare sense of scale and place. One articulated by a map that, more than in Tolkien's prose or Jackson's film, allows one to understand exactly how the Shire links to Mordor in geographical terms. What I'm trying to say here, as Behemoth climbs upon my shoulders onto the top of my head, is for a Lego game, the map in this game really gives you a sense of scale that is like unbelievable. The best part of this game is how you get to play as many notable characters. You switch between characters often enough to give you whiplash. And to that I say, break my neck. And that's really all I have to say about the Lego game. It is just so cute, so fun. We're all mostly familiar with the Lego games. This one has a scale and just expansive feeling that I think is like really amazing. Hence why people refer to it as Lego Skyrim. It's probably as close to Lego Skyrim as we're gonna get, right? Yeah, I think it's great. Definitely check it out. Definitely give it to your kids. It's so fun, and you don't have to be hyper familiar with Lord of the Rings to get into it, which is great. Okay, so now we are going to jump into the worst games. And I use the term worst very gently because I am not a game reviewer. I am not being critical of these games. I can be slightly critical from a game development standpoint only because I am familiar with game development, right? But I am not shitting on the devs that worked on these games in any stretch. I just want to remind you guys of that. It is not my place to do that. It's why I don't review video games, and it's why I largely don't even like game reviews or the culture behind it. But we're going to have a laugh. We're going to talk about some big question mark games and kind of wonder how the fuck these got made. So we're going to start with The Lord of the Rings, The Third Age. This should have been, for all intents and purposes, my favorite Lord of the Rings game. It had every component that I love in a game. But this game is a bit of a weird one. Rather than being a story of the Fellowship on their way to Mount Doom, this story follows a group of totally original characters who essentially stalk the Fellowship on their journey in a strange attempt to what seems like steal their glory. Now, original characters aren't always a bad thing, as my bae Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor has showed us, but these original characters are really irritating and go against not only Tolkien's lore, but the film universe in which the game is set as well. I'd say they don't have any redeeming qualities, but I truly am having a hard time identifying any qualities. The turn-based combat also gets incredibly repetitive, and I am absolutely the biggest simp for turn-based combat and Lord of the Rings. And not to be dramatic, but this game ruined my life. It took two of my favorite things and somehow managed to squander them in a huge way. This game, though, seems to be pretty split down the middle with regard to people's opinions. Some praise it and some truly hate it, but there are people out there that think this is one of the better Lord of the Rings games, largely because it is different and it's turn-based and it's completely original. My dislike for it has nothing to do with the original material, as I know it can be done well. My dislike comes largely from a game dev perspective, where I just feel like the game falls incredibly short in so many ways. You're just kind of like, what's the point the entire time you're playing?
Do not take me for some conjurer of cheap tricks.
Okay, so the next game we're going to talk about is The Lord of the Rings, Aragorn's Quest. If any of you have ever played this game, then you will understand how truly dull it is. Incredibly confusing, repetitive, and ultimately boring. The gameplay and graphical design seem to be aimed at a young audience. However, the story was convoluted and only made sense if you had read the books and watched the films, which clearly did not fit the model of the game. This left the game in a bit of a strange place in that it was too complicated for children and too dumbed down for adults. Aragorn's Quest is just a confusing title all around. The previous adaptations of the Peter Jackson film series more or less said all that there was to say in terms of bringing those movies to the hands of gamers. So Aragorn's Quest was also released in 2010, years after the conclusion of the movies. It just kind of makes you wonder who this was for. And that's before you even get into the family-friendly, cel-shaded aesthetic. While I think the aesthetic is a very weird fit, and if you go look at screenshots of the game, I think you will agree, it actually does look cute. The art is well done. Gimli, especially, is precious, but just seems a strange choice. This doesn't feel like it's for kids specifically, but at a glance, it looks like it would be. Though Return of the King and The Two Towers had their repetitive moments, this game truly feels like you're just doing the same thing over and over and over again. It doesn't even attempt the bare minimum of making itself accessible as an adaptation, honestly. And as GameZone's review put it, the only way to understand the game is to have prior knowledge of the movie's books, which is not accessible, and especially not accessible for kids who may not have read the books or seen the movies. And it feels like this game was aimed towards kids. So it just feels like a huge miss. This game sincerely feels like it was made for no one.
You shall not pass!
And the final question mark of a game is The Lord of the Rings Conquest. I feel like a lot of you will probably know this one. Brought to us by the same studio that gave us Star Wars Battlefront, The Lord of the Rings Conquest promised us the sun and the moon. Upon release, however, It seemed that Pandemic, the studio behind the game, didn't so much as create a new game, but had just reskinned Battlefront. As a result, we were left with combat that really didn't work in a graphical style that didn't suit the game at all. Like, at all. Looking at screenshots of this game feels like an absolute meme. This was an unprecedented mess by Pandemic that insulted the IP and ended up being a huge self-report on Pandemic. Now, I understand devs themselves rarely have control over the scope of projects, so this blame largely falls on the higher-ups who absolutely squandered this IP. Games Radar Michael Grapper gave Conquest a particularly sound thrashing. He said, "The combat is so intangible and repetitive, and the combo system so incompetent, there's not a single decent punch-up to be had," wrote Gapper. He further stated that the game felt as though it had a genuine contempt for the license it was adapting, and that I fully co-sign. I absolutely agree with that. There may be some truth to that. While titles like the Middle-earth Shadow series played fast and loose with the mythology in interesting ways, Conquest seems to hardly acknowledge the inner workings of the book. Like, it feels as if they handed all creative direction over to someone that's literally never read a book in their life. The direction here is incredibly confusing, and the gameplay is not fun enough to make up for this. The characters behave wildly different throughout. A good example being Wormtongue, who we talked about last episode, goes off to suddenly step up and become a self-sacrificing hero, which does not make any sense. It happens quite randomly. And unless my guy can unburn down the Shire, we don't need to shoehorn him in as some clunky, unnecessary trope, right? So this game is a kind of a mess top to bottom. I have never seen an IP squandered in such a way. It's almost worth playing kind of as a meme. So, I mean, I recommend you guys play all of these games, absolutely, but this could be a really fun one to stream as something funny for a Lord of the Rings fan to do. And with that, that essentially concludes the episode. I hope you guys learned something or got some insight on some games that you haven't played yet. As always, you know where to find us over at youhavemyswordpodcast.com. You can find links to all of our socials and where to support us. And yeah, I am streaming on Twitch. I have not in a while due to work and travel because I can only really stream on the weekends, and I am a busy woman making chainmail and trying to run various small businesses and do my podcasts. But I'm going to get back into it soon. And like I said, I would really like to stream Lord of the Rings online, and it would be very cool if you guys played with me. So you can go over to twitch.tv/Krysti Pryde and follow me, and maybe we can play Lord of the Rings online together. That would be very dope. But with that, thank you guys for listening, and as always, you have my sword. Behemoth, what's going on with you? Are we emotional today? Yeah, it's okay. I get it.
Edgeworks Nebula.